Good morning, guys. Welcome to another episode, Agency Exposed. What's going on, Mr. Kennott?
I'm doing good.
Yeah?
I'm doing great.
Yes, it's a good day today.
Brad, are you with us?
I am with you. It's early in the morning, but I've had 2 cups of my go juice
Awesome.
coffee, and
Just so you guys know, listening, that what we do when we record these, we will normally meet at the coffee shop down the street, and we'll talk about what we're going to talk about, drink some coffee, get some caffeine in us, and come back. So
Complain a bit.
complain about life and
yes,
hear about Brad's latest discoveries that he's done in his home repairs and things like that.
yeah.
Do you want to talk to us about your what's been keeping you up at night and how you discovered that?
Maybe that's for another. There was this hum. I'd wake up for about a month and a half where this hum would wake me up. It seemed to be always at around 1:15 to 2:15-ish, and I couldn't figure it out. It was like this low hum that I just couldn't. I thought it was in my head. I'm like, what is this hum? I wake my wife up if she ever woke up, which I said, do you hear that? She's like, nah, kind of. And then I didn't know if it was outside her house or inside her house. So finally, last week, I got so frustrated. I found, when you're sleeping in that sleeping state, you're like, oh, I'm so tired. I really do not want to get up to try to find this thing. I actually thought it was outside of the house because our houses are pretty close together in our neighborhood. So I thought maybe it was an air conditioning unit or something, and then I finally found it. But I'm going to leave you guys all wondering what it was.
You found the speaker that Bob and I put in your house.
Yes, I thought it was aliens trying to
Mine
get
is
into my head.
Mine is always in my head. So
Yeah, that hum.
Yeah.
today, guys, I thought we could talk a little bit about pricing, invoicing, payroll, all things financial. There's a lot of solopreneurs that listen to this podcast, and I want to make sure that we include them. And then obviously there are listeners that have staff and teams. So we've been in this business for quite a while, and we've all done different things. And I know you guys both have kind of different things you do in your agency. So Ken, why don't you start? We'll dive right in. Let's start with the invoice. Well, no. Let's start with the pricing first.
Yeah.
Let's start with, how do you price? I know that there's different methods and different ways. I know in my agency, when I ran it, I would do everything from hourly rates to project rates to retainers, hybrids of all three. And I know that's still a thing. But Ken, for you guys, I know you're very specialized in e-commerce exclusively.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about this one because I want to know. No one shares this information. Brad, you're going to have to share it today.
Open up, Brad.
I'm going to share it up now that I found the thing that's been keeping me up all night.
Yeah. No one shares this information, and you go and you talk to clients that are talking to other people, and you're never sure how many variables are in the mix, right? It's like not just about the project. It's not just necessarily about the results and the team and the scope and that kind of stuff, or even the pricing, but then there's just a whole bunch of different other variables. And so, yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. So for us, we can dig into why we've gotten here, but we have 3 different types of pricing models, or 3 basic types. And that is, we have projects, we have retainers, and then we have something called bill as incurred. So it's like the whole, if it's not scoped out, we don't know what it is, it's an additional several hours or something like that to do something. And we came to that because we tried to figure out, look, tell me if I'm wrong, but like the old school, that model of where you, just bill, someone asks you to do something. Hey, can you like build me a house? And it's like, sure. And like you start building the house and you just send them invoices along the way, and they don't know what it costs or why it costs and all that kind of stuff. Like that doesn't help anybody. Mm-hmm. I don't think it helps the agency, right? So because you don't know what to expect, you can't project. And projection of your finances is key to running a business that's stable and to being really able to do anything at a stable level and continue. So you can't project, and for the client, they obviously don't know what to expect, and it causes, I believe, a lot of friction on the back end. And so we've tried to avoid doing that as much as possible. There are certain instances where we have to do that, and that's that BAI, bill as incurred for us, type of thing, which is where it is additional and sometimes it's unknown, but we get really clear with the clients about that. When for the other two, for everything else, we're trying to fit that into a box. And so those other two boxes, we do projects. And so that's where we'll scope it out. We'll say, hey, this is going to cost, for us, it might be building a store, you know, and it could be, that's, you know, typically campaigns fall into retainer-based things. And so it's usually something like a development or design project, and we're in e-commerce, so it has to do with that. Sometimes it might be, we do sort of strategies, like kind of in the box strategies for people. So those are projects and they have a price tag on them. And for those, we actually go back through and we relate them we scope them by number of hours. We also scope it by timeline. And then we also scope it by, you know, the function, like what are we going to do?
Do you find that the determination of which method you use obviously depends on the project and the work done, but also, do you try to tailor it to the client and what they prefer? Do some clients prefer a fixed rate, or do some clients prefer an hourly rate?
I think everyone prefers
Or
a fixed rate, I would think, as much as possible, right, on the client side. But just the nature is, and things are unknown. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that. And you don't have control over everything. And I realize I'm in the weeds, but...
No. You know, one of the things I think, as we started this podcast, one of the things that I think is interesting is your philosophy, especially with the things that matter to create a healthy business. You're very protective of that, which I think is really good. I think there's things I need to do better in that area. But I think you go, what is best for our company to run and be healthy financially versus what is best for you as a client and the way that we bill you. You're more apt to try to get your client to work within your processes versus trying to adapt to their processes.
Yeah,
because I think that's challenging if you have a lot of clients with different processes and you're doing that all day long. Then you don't, you know, there's all these different rules that you have to abide by.
Well, I come from a fundamental belief that unless you're healthy, it may seem counterintuitive, but unless you're healthy as a business, you can't provide really good services to your clients.
Yes.
And so, while that may sound counterintuitive, it's just, we've talked about this before. Put your mask on first. You know, when you're in an airplane, hopefully we'll be able to get back to those sometime soon. They're the big things.
What's an airplane?
They fly. They're those big things.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I was wondering what those things were.
They're big things you can get good, cheap prices on right now.
Yeah, it's going
those
away,
are the things that were waking me up at night.
Yes, not those things.
Those are helicopters.
But when you used to be in an airplane, right? They'd say, "Hey, put your mask on first before you help anyone around you." And you'd think that, oh, how mean is that for me to first serve myself before my 3-year-old son? But obviously, if you go down, you can't help anybody else. So we kind of take that same philosophy with business, and there's quite a bit of it's actually everywhere. It seems to be only in certain agency services and those kind of industries where maybe there's a tradition that may not even be rooted in a healthy place where we adapt to everyone who comes in. But what I would say is, you know, when you go get coffee, there's a reason why they have a process, which is how they get you their coffee. If you're like, no, like for mine, I want you to roast the beans, you know, this way and then grind them, not using your normal grinder, but like go over there in the corner and do it. And then, you know, I'd like to pay you by check or whatever. Like if you start to mess with their process, they can't deliver that product to you.
Right.
And not only that, not only efficiently, but they don't know if their process makes their coffee great. But if you mess with that, then you might as well be brewing your own coffee.
Yeah.
And so that kind of philosophy kind of is why we get that way. It's not, I just want to be clear. It's not we're trying to, you know, make everyone do what we do, but we're saying, hey, we've got a process, a system, and a formula that helps us deliver that product for you.
And also helps you deliver that price because there's efficiency to the way.
Correct.
So, you know, the challenge sometimes that we have is that we spend a lot of time trying to get money, way more than we should. And I'm trying to kind of fix those things. And we have clients that come to us and say, listen, you know, there's clients that we do 150, 200 projects a year for. And they're like, okay, these kind of projects, which are considered this, they come from a whole different account in their business. So they come from different, this company, this organization is a little larger. And so they have the payments come from different accounts. They're like, we need to divide this up, these kind of projects into this type, all into one invoice and this all. So they've asked us for a lot of those things. It's not terribly difficult. It's kind of easy to remember, but still it gets to the point where it becomes more time and it becomes more cost.
And also,
should you charge more if they're putting you through more hoops just to get paid? That's outside of your process, and educating them that this is a process that we have, and this is the way we do things, and this is why we're able to, and this is based in our pricing. So as soon as you go out of that process, now it takes more time and energy. And yes, you can have that, because I don't like going to a restaurant and asking for something unique and they go, we can't really do that. That's outside of our, that's not, and then like, okay, I'm gone. But at the same time, I don't mind sometimes paying a little bit more for being a little high maintenance. I'm not high maintenance, I don't think, but don't ask my wife that question. But, if I go in and order something that's a little unique, I feel like the customers should be serviced. If you have the product, then.
So I believe that as an agency, you should think about what is the formula that makes us be able to deliver this product for the value and the price well, efficiently, scalably, healthily for your business, so that you can stay in business. And then, when there are requests, it's not that you shouldn't be able to accommodate those. Like find places where it's okay to customize this area, or it's okay to customize this area, but there are certain pieces of it that are like, hey, this is part of just the system. This is the formula. And for those pieces, it's like this. Once it goes into like a system, then as soon as it could be the slightest change, but as soon as it's a change, then it's not a system anymore.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to be aware of that, I think.
What type of commitments would you reduce your hourly rate? Like for instance, if a client says, hey, I'm willing to commit to this for a year and a half, sign contracts, whether it's a statement of work or retainer, let's just say, but they're coming back and say, but for that, I want a reduced rate.
Yeah.
Like what are the projects
so
in your mind, or the type
we
of
should all
commitment?
say that these are all this information is as of whatever, 2020.
Sure.
Halfway through 2020. But let's talk about all that stuff. So like when it's retainers, which is that third type that we do, for us, we give a discount on a rate for a longer term commitment, which makes sense. It's like it gives us ability. And again, like if you're going to really service somebody, you need the ability to know that you can invest into making sure you get those services. So yes. I never understood the month to month thing too much, unless it was just, you have a formula that works, that's great for you. But I feel like a lot of people do it and they don't realize that it's unhealthy, because if you can't invest into the success of that project or client, then it's not going to be successful. And how can you really invest if you don't have any sort of commitment at all? I think that's not really that possible, especially if you have costs attached to it. So ours, we reduce our hourly rates around 6 months. So if we hit about 6 months, then we'll reduce it from. And I'll talk through I don't know. Let's share our hourly rates.
Well.
What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Let's talk a little bit about, before we get into hourly rates, in the same context, is if somebody is, say, a solopreneur starting up, or if they've been in the business for a while in the agency world, what do you feel are some best practices and philosophies that you bring to the table based on your experience on how to price a client and a project? Because, one of the things that I always did when I ran an agency was there was always an allowance for overage. You always say, okay, this we scoped this out, we've done our due diligence. This project's going to take, 75 hours, but we're going to add an extra 10 on because we know it always ends up there's extras. Is there is there a formula that each one of you follow for things like that?
It's funny because I grew up in old school agency, advertising agency world. I used to sit around in my office and smoke cigarettes all day long, like and
drink bourbon.
And drink bourbon. No. And so there was a lot of best practices in the billing, especially with media and stuff. And that kind of stuff is, for the most part, most of our clients don't even understand. They don't live in that world anymore, and they don't even understand that it's a completely different business. So we had the always, the expected 10% overages. We had those in our contracts and stuff like that, so that you always make
So
sure.
it was truly an estimate, and then the final cost could be up to 10% over. Okay.
Yeah, the 10%. You had overages and that were part of your contract and all that stuff. And it's nowadays I don't do that at all. We try to, when we estimate, is to try to really adhere to that as long as the scope of work doesn't change. And it's really difficult when we do stuff, because a lot of the things that we do, it's not like we sell a widget that we sell over and over again. Sometimes we sell services and processes that are really easy for us to estimate without a lot of information from the client. But most of the stuff that we do, we really need to know specifics. And a lot of times are like a new client doesn't have an RFP. They haven't really gone through and open up the hood of what they really need and identified all those things, because they don't know what they need. Sometimes they know the end result. And so it's really difficult for us to write a statement of work that is concrete and doesn't have a lot of gray in it when we don't have a lot of information. So
that's the hardest thing about agency life, in my opinion.
And clients don't want to pay for 3 or 4 or 5 half-day meetings of discovery meetings and pay for it just to understand them better, so that you can actually then get a real statement of work done. And so it's always a challenge of doing that. And so
we've gone back and forth on those discovery meeting things. I do think it seems like people, again, like the reality is that takes time, that takes work, and there's value that comes out of it. And so we try not to do big discoveries unless it's paid.
Yes.
And most of the time what we do is we do a reasonable amount of discovery for things that, there's a lot of stuff that we know what it's going to be like, but for the projects where it's like, there's some unknown here, then we try and put that into the first part of the project.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's interesting because when we work with startups, which I would say about 30% of our business is startup related, it's actually easier because a lot of times we're doing things where we're helping them initially form their brand. And then at that point, you're spending time with your client. You're learning about all these other needs that you've discussed early on, like an e-commerce solution. Before you even get to the e-commerce solution, you're talking and unpacking their brand, and you're understanding them and their organization, their processes that will help you later to identify things that will be in statement of work and projects. So for us, we have to get to know the client. That takes a lot of time. And so if we can actually put that into initial project where they feel like they're getting something back, like a brand, right? We're developing their brand, which could be everything from their brand voice, their value props, and really looking deeply into what makes their products unique, as well as maybe developing a brand identity system or some brand architecture. We get that discovery in that first project. So they pay for it, but they really get something of value in return. They're getting their brand developed. But at the same time, that's where our discovery happens for all future projects. But when you're dealing with an established brand you're dealing with somebody who hasn't, maybe on the other side, like working with a marketing manager who hasn't done the projects they've been assigned to get done, like an e-com system. Let's say somebody in marketing hasn't actually fully built out an e-com or an Amazon strategy. They don't know what to ask. They don't even know they just know it as, I need an e-com. I need to sell this project online. And so then you have to look at it differently, because there's no way to know what type of, from the get-go. It's hard to, and they like, hey, can you give me an estimate for that?
Yeah.
Hey, we need a website developed. Can you give me an estimate for that?
I would just want everyone to come out and say, like, estimates, like, I mean.
Yeah, what is that? Like, I need an e-com. I need an Amazon strategy. Can you give me an estimate for that?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone here has a crystal ball where they can like see into the future and know exactly what it's going to cost.
The other struggle with that type of scenario is always the uncomfortable conversation that, it's happened from the beginning of time. You say, well, what's your budget? And then you play the game, and they're like, well, I'm not going to give you tell you how much I have, because
Yes.
I want you to tell me. And the reality is, what what potential customers, if you're listening to this, the struggle with that, you need to know is, I'm not going to spend, a ton of time on
20 hours working on it.
Yeah, on one specific type of strategy for you, when actually your budget really drives, you need a different type of strategy, because your budget really does drive what I'm going to come to the table with. Not that I'm trying to get all your money. It's more of, if you've got X amount of dollars, then we can do this type of strategy. But if you have this amount of dollars, then we can do this type of strategy.
I've always been really frustrated because there's especially new clients that say, "Hey, we got a $50,000 job, initial job, and there's a lot more projects we want to do with our agency. We're going to choose. We got a $50,000 job, and we want you to give us a very detailed statement of work." Well, it may take $4,000 to $5,000 of agency time just to be able to unpack it with your team,
Charge
go through all
for
the pricing,
proposals. That's the answer.
right? And so you spent $5,000, and if that could be, that's 10% already that is out. That might be your profit for the project.
Yeah. So there's a couple things I want to make sure we hit here, because the first thing is all the time that you spend that you don't charge for, like when you get into profitability of your company, that still needs to be tracked, because that's expense. We actually started tracking that a couple years ago, like all the pre-sale stuff, so that we could and we don't charge for it. Sometimes we charge explicit, but if it's just time spent, talking with the potential client, that kind of thing, that needs to be tracked, because you need to know, like, what you may think. You may end that project and be like, "Sweet, we were profitable by $5,000." Like, actually, no, you spent $5,000
exactly
up front, so you're not. And that is, if you want to run a business that's actually going to not go out of business, like, you need to know those things.
At some point, you've got to charge for that time.
Right.
It was a game changer for me and for our company when I finally said, "You know what? I'm going to start charging for proposal." I tell the client up front, if you want me to put the time in to give you this proposal, it's going to cost you X. Now, usually 9 times out of 10, I would not try to make a profit on that. It would just be more like, let's just cover our time. So it was an outrageous amount, but it helped in the sales process, because I would say, here's how much it's going to cost. Now, at the end of that time, you can have the proposal, you pay me, and you can execute this whoever you want, and it will be detailed.
Right.
Or I will apply that amount toward the project price. And so you have something invested for the client. There's a better chance they're going to close with you than not. But that was a game changer, because it was hard at first. Many clients were like, "Well, no one's charging me for a proposal." Okay, you got to be willing to walk away.
I love that. Because it also, we know that psychologically, it just gets things serious faster, and that's just better for everybody, right? Like, even and applying that money to whatever the project is, there's no lose, right? Unless it's somebody that's trying to get 20 proposals from 20 people, and that, I just never believed that was I'll just be honest, like, an ethical thing to do. I know it's common for businesses to do that, but
even if it's 3, many times what clients will do is they'll take your time and effort, and then they'll hand it over to one they like and say, "Hey, these guys did a great proposal. Can you do this?"
And we never would do that to a client. Like, we'd never take their business model and be like, "Here, other client, like, look at this thing." And so I really, I personally don't. We try and stay away from that. And anytime we know that we're in the mix with a bunch of other people, we're trying to shortcut it, not just for the sake of like, "Hey, let's just be respectful of everybody's time and effort here." But what I wanted to say to all this point, to this and what you said earlier, is trust is really important. So, like, the reason people don't want to share budgets, and I get it, that you may not know legitimately. That's one possibility. But then most people have at least an amount they wish it would be, right? Like, and a company has a budget attached to it. So I would say, you have to build that trust so that people will share that with you, because that is the number one thing that kind of gets everything down the road faster. It's way better. And the only reason they wouldn't is because they don't trust you. They may think that, hey, if I tell them, the budget, they're just going to charge me for that and waste my money. But the truth is we all know that something can cost, you could do something for $3,000, you could do something for $3 million. And you could do that the same thing. It's just on different levels of execution, right? And so in order to dial in what's the best stewarding of that budget, you need to know it. And so often we'll try and build that trust, and pretty typically people will share that with us right up front because because what we're trying to do is help them spend it the right way. And we'll say, hey, look, we're going to give you free advice at the beginning. You can go anywhere with that. But if you tell us what you want to invest or what you think it should cost, then we can help you spend that wisely. We can help you also understand maybe why that might not be accurate. So I do think building that trust to get that number is important.
That's good. Let's talk about rates a little bit. You were gonna share that.
No, I just think that that's an interesting topic no one ever shares.
So what is your typical rate for what you charge at your agency?
We are at $195 right now for if anyone like it, just retail price. So any project starts at that. We will reduce that to $175 for larger projects and longer term projects. And I realize that just truthfully, like where you start breaking even is about somewhere in the 100 to 150 range. And that people may be like, what in the world are you spending? But like when you talk about capacity, because look, if you have a team and even yourself, if you're a solopreneur, like you're not working 40 hours a week. And no one is. It's almost impossible to have ultimate efficiency with capacity.
Unless you just have one client.
And even then, yeah, right. Like there's admin stuff. There's other things that happen through that day. And so I think you have to be realistic that like people are, your team's not going to be able to work 40 hours a week in billable hours. And so when you really, we used all of our data over years and realized that our cost basis, again, when you take sort of net is in that 100 to 150 range. And so I think, and I bet that a lot of people, I don't know, I'd be curious to know what you think, but a lot of people are like, wow, that's expensive. But I bet if you have a business and you look at it, it's probably in that range for you as well when you take everything into account.
Yeah, that's a challenge, right? I think the savvy business clients, they understand the type of expenses it takes just to run any business. And they're not as
and you take all that non-billable time that might be spent in a proposal or all those different things.
And the challenge is that some clients will look at it depends on the size and their background of your client, but sometimes they'll look at you and go, well, they're trying to match an agency cost to hiring a freelancer themselves or in-house person, what that would cost them. But sometimes they don't actually do the math of even their own employees of how much it's actually costing them to have that person sit in their, at their office.
I find that people generally don't do
the math. No.
Well, it's just even a naivety. It's like,
yeah, so they're comparing. You're like, well, we've been hiring a freelancer to do this for a long time, and now we're thinking about going out to an agency, and our freelancer only charges $60 an hour. You're charging $200 an hour. Like, where's the value to that? If am I getting a more value? Am I getting more seasoned, individuals? We charge between $165 and $220 an hour, depending on what we're doing. We like to get to the point where, with all of our projects in the end, where we're at around $150 an hour range. And, we try to adhere to our estimate. So we'll create an estimate based on hours for the most part. And we have a different hourly range depending on the expertise that are brought into the project. We have some pretty high-end technical programmers, for instance, that we might bill a little higher for different types of work. And this is all internal resources. If we have to hire specific experts from the outside, that could be more, depending on what that would be for the job. But for the most part, we I would say that for most of our clients, about 90% of our billings is all internal resources. So everyone that's on staff, or even if they're contractors, where we don't like more regular internal contractors, not something that we farm out. So we try to hit that number. I think I feel pretty confident with our pricing. We also know that
Sound confident.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I also know that there is certain times that when you're especially working with a new customer, when it's a larger project, I would say about 80% of the time they start to want to beat you up a little bit on price. So you got to have a little bit of padding there.
It's an
because
unfortunate
knowing
thing.
that they're probably going to do that.
You know what, I do believe you can combat that, but it's hard. But we took some intentionality around saying look, right up front, there's not a bunch of buffer built into here to negotiate on. This is just, we're honest, we're transparent. That's kind of how we operate. It's this is what it's going to take.
Yeah.
And I've found that sort of transparency, people want that. No one wants to do the negotiation game, even on the client side. I mean, there's a few weirdos that love negotiating and beating people up, but at the end of the day, most people just want to talk about the project. I've found, but that's helped. It's just sort of being transparent up front, and just being hey, look, this is not our intention.
I feel like our prices are similar, and it's hard to know as an agency how do you price? What are other agencies? Because you want to be competitive.
So what's your average project price? For us, I would say not retainer. But when we talk about projects, unless it's something small that we do, I guess without the outliers, I would say most of them fall between 30 and 150.
Yeah.
K, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I would say not a per project base, but how do I? We won't. It's hard for us to take on a new customer if they're not going to at least have, in the short term, a quarter, 3 or 4 months, spend $50,000 with us. We just can't really. And there's more. That's just the opening. That's just the initial projects that we would do. There would be more than that. We probably wouldn't be able to. If you just had $20,000 and that's all you're going to spend with us, and you're probably going to say goodbye after that,
right.
The amount of investment it takes, there's no way we could actually support that.
Yeah.
So.
Which could be a nice budget to a solopreneur or a small, very small agency.
I from this conversation, if you hear anything else, talk to each other, because that's the beauty of it. Not every client, a great client for someone is not a great client for another, and vice versa. And so talk with other agencies and because when people come to you for that kind of thing, and you can't help them, but it's not $5, right?
Yeah.
Then it'd be great if you could point them somewhere.
Yeah, that would be great if you could point them somewhere, for sure. And I think that's our challenge too, is that
we've developed,
what they're asking for though is they need an agency. They don't need just one freelancer. So the challenge is sometimes they just don't understand what the cost is for what they're asking for.
Right.
So nobody would be prepared to do it. Or if they did say yes, the client may not get what they
need. Education.
Yeah, that's the main thing, which I think we need to do a whole nother episode on the education process. I just wish that clients had some source they could go to, because this is why we started the podcast. It's everybody keeps everything quiet. And so the clients don't know where to go. So when they come to you and you say $30,000 to $40,000 to do their e-commerce correctly, they're like, oh man.
And no one publishes prices.
And they're like, oh, I'm thinking it cost a few $1,000s to build out my website because I saw, Wix or Squarespace.
Hey, doesn't it cost $5 to get a logo on Fiverr? Can I get my whole brand identity for $5?
Yeah.
And then you're like, what? What?
Yeah. It's yes.
And
you don't even know what a brand.
It's really not their fault. It's because they just don't know what they don't know.
Right. Right. It's an education thing. Okay, so let me ask this. Why don't you publish prices on your website?
I don't publish prices, but what I do is I have a service agreement that I will give to anyone who's looking. In fact, sometimes I send that to perspectives, and it completely outlines our hourly rates. It doesn't break them down into specifics, but it does show the range. When it comes to that, I don't publish the prices only because I don't.
Well, publishing an hourly rate probably wouldn't be effective, but
yeah.
But let's just be honest. If I go to a website now, even I want something and I can't find pricing, it's contact us. It's that is the biggest barrier. So for the longest time for us, I've been thinking about how can we publish reasonable things that Because everyone's a little bit different. That's the challenge.
We've talked about creating like
I feel like it's a huge
like
barrier.
a minimum e-com package that's like 30,000, and here's what you get. Boom, 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 boom. Kind of making it more of a very easy product that somebody can get their heads around. We just haven't been able to. We're concerned about that a little bit because what it does is we're concerned about getting that type of client that is doesn't really have the resources, is in a very seed state of their startup, seed money startup, right? They don't have. I mean, the number one reason why companies don't make it is they don't have enough money to last. So
you know what's funny is,
and that's always challenging. So do we want those type of clients? Number one,
it's a good question. It's a good point.
And then maybe there's a great business out there of doing $30,000 e-com packages that include some Instagram, Facebook, or other type of social media advertising. But is it enough? Then my challenge is it really enough for every customer to actually give them a success? Right. And if it doesn't give them, we talked about this on other podcasts, if it doesn't give them a success, are you setting them up for failure? Because they need actually $300,000 to start and they're only spending 30.
One of the
they don't know the difference.
I don't know if you guys like Grant Cardone, but I think he's funny. But he has one of these books. I think it's called Sell or Be Sold. And I listened to that years ago. And one of his things is if someone's not buying from you, it might be that you need to increase your price because clearly the thought is clearly you're not delivering them something that gets them excited enough to actually say yes. And that may mean that you don't have enough. And I think there's a piece of wisdom there that's accurate, which is like, be aware that if you reduce something to fit inside of someone's budget, we know that it has to be successful. And we talked about success. Success is not necessarily like making them a success because that's in their hands, but doing what you said you would do, it has to do that. And it has to do that either on your dime or it's going to be inside of their budget.
And so I know agencies.
So you might have to increase that.
I know of agencies. They're just they'll do like a $3,000 to $4,000 ad package for you, and they do it for everyone. And it's not custom to a product, and they literally will go through clients after clients after clients, and probably 50% of them will even be happy. They'll leave. They actually do leave. So they're constantly adding more sales because it's a cheaper product and it's a cheaper entry. They have a lot more availability to get clients. They're getting more clients, but they go through them because the clients don't get what they think they're going to get. So they burn these clients out the back door while selling on the front end. And all of the employees are frustrated because they're on the front lines trying to mitigate all the unhappy customers because they're not getting exactly what they think they get. Well, you're not going to get a lot for that kind of package. You're just in their minds. I think every entrepreneur and every startup has a vision that their product is amazing and their product's just going to sell off the shelves immediately, and they're nobody's seen anything like this before, and we don't even have to spend money on advertising. They're just going to come and knock on our door and buy our product. If that's you, that's probably not reality. And so they will, with stars in their eyes, they want to buy these cheaper packages from agencies because they feel like it's going to be so easy to sell this thing, and the reality is most products are not easy to sell.
I think what you were saying about Grant Cardone is it's sales, agency sales and marketing 101 is if you come down, the lower you come down on your prices, you are communicating with your prospect what value you are. And like it or not, if you're the cheapest in the market, then you have the lowest value to people in the market. They don't see you as valued. And I think the example is not to keep using an outrageous example, but I can go to Best Buy today. I can get $1,000 Windows laptop that's tricked out and it's a powerhouse for $1,000. I would never ever do that. I will spend 3 times as much and get the latest MacBook Pro from Apple because in my mind it's a higher value, it works better, it's more consistent, and it's easy to use.
Right.
It has a much higher value in my mind than a $1,000 tricked out Windows computer. Nothing against Windows. That's just me. And I think that's the same principle as the psychology of if you keep lowering your prices, people are going to be like, well, they can't be that great. So I'll and then you find out the client went and spent twice as much with your competitor down the street, and you're like, well, wait a second, they were moaning about price.
The challenge that I have with a lot of businesses is they really truly don't understand brand equity.
Right.
And you can't have brand equity from the get-go with any new product. You really that takes time, and it takes a lot of commitment and resources into that commitment of building a great brand and have
It takes
that
an
brand
investment
equity.
with no real return.
With no return on investment quickly.
Immediately,
So,
right.
Yeah, I think anyone has to offer, and this is another podcast, is offer the value of a return on investment so that they can afford to stay in the game to build equity in their brand. But when you have brand equity, your advertising and marketing costs will go down. I mean, you look at companies like Tesla who don't spend any. I've never seen a Tesla ad. Have you?
I think they don't spend money on marketing.
Yeah, but the thing
That's
is,
the
they
deal.
have initially built brand equity. A lot of it is maybe because of Elon
And
Musk.
that had a lot of cost to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of cost to that. You're right. So,
And yet there's other full electric cars you can buy for a lot cheaper.
They've done it because they are the best. They immediately had brand equity, but then you also have Elon Musk, who is a self-promoter, and he himself is the biggest. He's a big PR promoter. I mean, in the end, and
Well,
so
I mean-
he's getting in the media and getting their brand in the media, good or bad, right?
Well, Tesla's a good example because they don't not spend money on marketing because they're cheap. Right?
No.
Because he spends, like Elon Musk, you read his biography and you hear how he went from PayPal into Tesla. I believe that was what it was. And he took all the money he had made on PayPal and basically kept $1 for himself and dumped it all
I think he
into Tesla.
slept on a friend's couch
Yeah.
or something. I don't think he
And he
even
made
had
a
an
good amount of
apartment.
money. And so he's not afraid. And they just recently, I don't know if they're profitable yet, but I know that they've been, it's been a question about their viability even in the past year or so. But yet they're the best electric car, and they'd spend no money in marketing, but they invest like crazy in brand equity.
And the thing is, when have you seen an actual Apple ad on social media? Unless it's being co-promoted by one of their providers like AT&T or something. Apple doesn't do a lot of ad spend either. And so it's once you have this brand equity, then it's a lot easier to sell your product. And it's those are the things that, trying to find clients who are going to want a partner, a long-term partner, is really difficult these days. Most clients just want a quick buck and they want to test you, and if you don't work out for them quickly, they're going to move on because they're looking for initial $1 in, $2 out, $1 in, $2 out immediately.
And it comes back to education. It's funny internally. This is widespread in the e-commerce world because in e-commerce, a lot of people, some guys going around telling people that you can pay $1 and get $2 back on the internet. Like that, I don't know who that is, but if you see him, tell him to stop. But this guy, but everyone seems to think at the beginning when they're not in it, that it's this magic slot machine, right? And I actually talk about this quite a bit because it's educating an audience on the fact that, look, a business takes investment. It has to. So you really need to believe in what the business is about and what you believe the value of creating a successful business is, because it's going to be hard along the way. And so, because likelihood is you're not going to spend $1, make $2. That's not going to happen. That's very rare. You can't bank on that. It's also, and I believe our world has told us this idea of growth hacking your way to success and the finish line, all this kind of stuff is sort of the way. That's not really a strategy. You need to have a long-term strategy, and that takes real intentionality and real investment. And that is how we need to educate people on that. I think that's a really important thing because, as great as all the technology is, it's also taught people, I think, maybe unwisely that, or maybe it hasn't taught them, but you can get the idea that it's easy, it's low cost, and I don't have to invest anything into it. And even big brands are sort of have maybe adopted some of that thinking, and it's still not the truth. The truth is you have to invest in something to actually create something. And so what we try and do is I'll talk to people and say okay, what is the value of, what's your goal? That's usually our first question, but then what is the value of that goal to you? like really, like what is that value? Get them like being honest about that, because if that value is $50, then I wouldn't spend more than $50. If that value is truly whatever it is, like, and it's not always numbers, but like, I'm just going to use them, like, it's, you know, $10 million. Okay, well, what would you spend to make that? Like, what would be reasonable to do that? Does it make sense to like not be like, I wouldn't spend more than $5,000 getting $10 million. So then you must not believe in it or something. Like there's a disconnect there. And so walking people through that is an important step.
Well, I think there's just an ignorance. It's what we come back to. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's just they don't know what they don't know. They see, you know, these things happening on the internet, and people, like you said, people talking about, you know, I'm making six figures.
Man, I see so many of those ads.
My Shopify store.
Everyone's like,
yeah, and then the reality is that's just
their Lambo.
That's not true.
Their Lambo in the background.
Yeah.
Holy cow! I could. Anyways, that's so funny. Oh, you know what?
So it's just build it and they will come.
And I think the point is this is not at all. It's not complaining about that. I think there is a very real issue with what it can be perceived to be, and so realize that that's possibly in your prospect's mind when they come to you. You need to educate them.
Yeah. Can we talk a little
Let's
bit?
keep going on the pricing thing.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about with pricing, also the way that we invoice, maybe even some of the software that we use that might be valuable for some folks.
Yeah.
And then, so for us, we invoice. So we typically have a net 30. There are a few clients that have asked us to go beyond that, and we've agreed because of certain relationships with them. But we typically offer a net 30 if it's a project that we. So a lot of times with our statement of work, we try to, like, let's just say, I'm just kind of giving an example. Let's just say it's a 2-month project. We try to divide up payments into equal amounts. Like, let's say we might do 3 payments, and the initial payment is due upon signing of the statement of work. So we need to get some type of commitment down payment, especially for our new clients. So if it's a brand new client, for sure we're getting a deposit. At some level, it could be a third of the project, and then we bill again somewhere between, and we try to have our last billing come in right around where the project's going to end. But one of the things that we've done is we have made sure that we don't get that last money after we're done with the project. We actually get it on the time that the statement of work says. So it's based around where it should end. But if the client pushes the project down the road a little bit, we still get that payment. We're not. Yeah. And we even have customers that are saying, well, we're not quite done with it yet. You know, could you hold off on that last invoice? No, that's what you've agreed to do at that date. It has nothing to do with when that project ends. It really does have to do with that date. And we just kind of plan it that way.
That's a huge issue with clients, because they're saying is, oh, if I pause and I don't give you information, you're not working on my project, so there's no billable hours. And what they don't understand is just the simple principle of, I've billed this based on a time period of I am stopping work on other clients or allocating resources or hiring someone. And if you don't fulfill your end of the bargain in that time period, I am going to lose money. So it's not about I'm not working on your project, so therefore you don't have to pay me. It's you miss the calendar and you still have to pay me.
In our statement of work, we've gone to the point where we have a lot more language in it that spells it all out and why. We even get to the point where we have, if our point of contact changes, we have the ability to actually charge.
We just added
time to re-educate the new contact, because that takes time and energy.
It's really funny that we've just added that, because it has been a key problem with several projects, and a lot of time. It costs. You have to re-educate.
Yes,
and then it also just creates problems because all of a sudden there's a new person that doesn't have any context, that you have no relationship with, that now maybe like, oh, I don't agree with what this other person did. So I do think it's important to. I think it's best for it's best if that clause is never used. It just needs to be like, hey, it's important that you keep the point of contact the same.
Our language is in there. We've never had to do anything, but we tell if there's a new point of contact, you are agreeing that you're going to educate internally that new point of contact, and that if that point of contact changes anything in the SOW, it would be considered new work. if there's any additions that they come to the table with, because they have a way of thinking. But I find it interesting because one of my things that in an ideal world, here's how I would love to work. We create a statement of work with payment timing, and then we don't even, we invoice, but we don't actually have any net. We have what you do, which I think is interesting, is ACH draws. So you actually draw the money through an agreed ACH. So you're actually pulling money from their bank account versus invoicing them and then waiting around for the check to show up.
You don't send invoices, you send receipts.
Yes. That's and we're actually starting to change that language. It goes back to the idea that you just mentioned, Rob. Like, well, if there is no, like, all costs continue to accrue. Like in the world, right? Like everyone gets paid. No one doesn't pay their rent because
they're on vacation.
because they're on vacation. Whatever, and so someone has to handle that. So I think it's about being mature and an adult about just understanding that, number one. But you're right. Like, so, if a big thing is are delays on the client side, and so I think it's important to be aware and educate around, like, the fact that, like, that delay, like, yeah, you're paying those people. You've decided not to do work that you could have done in that time frame. So there's a cost attached to that, and so that cost has to be accounted for somehow. Now, if you decide to, as an agency, to take it on yourself, God bless you. But I think a lot of times it's a big vulnerability that actually really hurts a lot of companies, because that delay means that you're not getting paid and you're paying for it and you're not taking on work as well. It's just this.
It just sets up a bad relationship with the client, because they begin to. You're not advocating for yourself. You're not putting your mask on first, and then they begin to take advantage of that and say, "Well, we can keep them on the side here, and if we need to delay, it's fine, because they're a service agency. We're paying them for service."
What would it say about me if we scheduled this podcast? I just didn't show up for like 45 minutes. I was like, "What's up, guys? 45 minutes late. Let's go." And you're like, doesn't really value you, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's certainly not a balanced relationship if that is just how I operate and I don't care, And I think it's important that, like, there are people behind all these things. And so there's a relationship that it takes to create a really great project. And so the way we try and operate very transparently and upfront. We have disciplines that are important to creating success and also to keeping our sanity, and we stand by those, because that's very important. And we try not to let anyone abuse those. And also our goal is to be respectful no matter what, and build really great relationships. And so it's important that clients have those similar values, because when they do, man, it's just magic. Like, things are just working, and when they don't, it can be frictionful. But to your point, Brad, we do. It's interesting how similar, because we've never even talked about this, and I would love feedback from anyone listening. But we're similar. We have a payment schedule that's set out at the beginning. It's sort of part of the agreement, and our goal is to. Our number one goal is, hey, we want to be an efficient, smart business so that we can be a really great partner to our clients. And we want to help our clients be really great, healthy, smart, efficient businesses, because that's how you really create something good. And so we also lead by example in a lot of those ways. And one of them is, like, we're trying to be upfront about as much as possible without it being overwhelming. And so the payment schedules, we lay them out. We actually, for the most part, do equal, if it's a project, certainly retainer goes this way, but if it's a project, just equal payments monthly, in advance of that month. And our payments are due on receipt, and it's like a subscription service. Like, we take your payment info, and it gets charged on those dates that are in the contract.
Do you use any special software for that?
That's yeah. And I think I mentioned this maybe a couple episodes ago, like, hey, and if anyone listening has a suggestion, let me know. But the technology for for service businesses doesn't seem to have caught up with everything else. So it's funny that you're saying we're having this conversation, but it's 2020 and most everyone else in the world, other industries like operate this way, right? Through pay immediately, electronic payment, that kind of thing. But for some reason in service businesses, it hasn't evolved there. But we use, obviously, we use QuickBooks Online. We have a couple merchant accounts that we will use to, it's third parties, their own thing, secure, and they store the payment info. So QuickBooks has a merchant account kind of thing. And when those dates come, they just get hit on that payment info.
So the customers sign a ACH agreement that you will be pulling.
We have electronic agreements, and in those agreements is payment info as well. And so to sign the agreement, you have to fill out payment info, and that all gets put into that system. And then it just goes. And if we always say, like, look, if something is unexpected happening in your business, like, let us know. Like, I think communication about those things is really important because then we can work together about it. But the expectation is that, it goes on this agreement. It's not based on deliverables, because let's just be honest, like, very rarely have I seen projects where agencies have 100% control of the output deliverable. And so I think it's unwise to even suggest that you as an agency can control that deliverable 100%, or that your payment is dependent on it. Like, what if I had an employee and I was like, well, they submit something for me to approve, like we write a lot, so here's the latest article, and I just don't get to it for a couple weeks. Do I not pay them for those couple weeks?
Yeah.
Of course not. And so,
and I think that's the thing, is that at times clients don't understand that there's participation, right, in our business.
It comes down to education.
And if they can't participate and they don't have the time and energy, don't do the project. Like,
Right.
if you cannot, and we go through what is expected, but if you really don't have the time and you're not going to be able to give us the information that we need, how can you move forward? And that happens to us a lot, where we stall out. And so within our contracts, we actually have, if things are stalled out, we start charging for it. And it says we've allocated resources and time dedicated to you. And so we want that.
It's interesting
reciprocated.
that we've added that recently too, because
It's a stall out clause.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those things that no one, like, we don't make money doing that. Like, we don't want anyone to pause. It's just that it's more of a mature awareness.
Yeah.
And this is a balanced relationship, and so let's understand the boundaries to having a good relationship. And and I think that it's really important to know that it is a team effort. And so to that point, there are some of those things that are just realities that I think need to be obvious. And the other side of it is, I think that, like I was just saying, like, we don't control the deliverables. And so, payment happens regardless of those. The schedule is independent of deliverables. We don't do delivery on the final project or anything like that, because, again, like, there are delays and those kind of things. And that's all fine. It happens. The times when it's bad is when it's actually done in a way that's really not valuing one side. If they're
that's the key.
That's important. Like, if there's legitimate stuff, we work with everyone on that. But
do you guys feel like, and Brad, I want to get to your invoicing methods here in a second as we wind up, but don't you feel like too, part of that is many times you're working within an organization that one person, you have one point of contact that sells the product, another point of contact that signs off on it, and then it's all handed over to another one. And so these delays and these misunderstandings of, well, this person never read the agreement,
right,
or this person, this part of this project is handled by this department. So that's where you start to get the breakdown of, well, this guy can't get to it for a week, this guy can't get to it for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And it gets super challenging. Like, it goes, that point of contact clause is, that point of contact is so important. We've had that, where the project happens, and then it all of a sudden just gets passed over to someone, and we didn't even realize that was actually what was going to happen. And it's just the person's like, hey, what are we doing?
In the music business, they have something called a key man clause, right? And the key man clause is basically says, I'm the artist is signing this agreement based on the relationship with this person. Usually, it's an A&R rep or a representative from the label, and it's this contract is binding as long as that person is involved, because that person usually believes in, as their point of contact, is advocating for the artist. But if that person leaves, then this contract is parts of it are null and void, or whatever. And I think maybe there needs to be a key man clause in these contracts.
Because let's just be honest, it's not just, a benign, what's the word? It's not just like two organisms doing their thing. It's a relationship that matters about the people that you build.
And sometimes, I mean, thank goodness we haven't had this, but I could see it happening, is we have one point of contact with a corporation. And if that person leaves, there isn't somebody that's going to take over the project. And so all of a sudden now, that's a scary place to be, because you have your relationships is only with a single person, and it's harder sometimes for them to open the door to bring other people in, especially if they're the ones that you're dealing with on a daily basis and they're not bringing anybody else. There's no project manager. They are the project manager. That's really difficult. Well, I'm going back to the software. So about, 10 years ago, we were going to look at QuickBooks, and this is before they were online. And you almost had to be a CPA to use QuickBooks at times. There's so much of it I didn't even use, and it was very complicated. Since then, obviously, they've gone online. They have QuickBooks Online. It's a lot more user friendly. But at the same time, I wanted clarity in my business. I didn't want to give it to a third party to manage, where I had to ask them things and they were the gatekeeper to my money. Right. And so what I did is I went on and I started using FreshBooks, mainly because they had a feature at that point that you could email invoices and you could see when they opened them. And it just had a lot of user friendly for the non-CPA person like me, a very layman person. And since then, they've done a good job of continuing to add features that are very competitive with QuickBooks. It's not quite as elaborate for certain businesses, but it works right now for ours. Once you are on a platform, it's really difficult to get off. And so the cool thing about us is that FreshBooks has been, and this isn't a plug for them, by the way, we don't get paid by them. We could, though, if you're out there. They've done a good job keeping up and adding a lot of new features for sure. There's part of us that have outgrown it a little bit, but because of the history and the reporting, we've stuck with it, and it's been solid. But when we have a person who manages all of our AR and AP, and we do a lot of forecasting, financial forecasting with it. And then we have a CPA as well.
I had a friend that was a CFO for a really big company several years ago, and we were on QuickBooks Desktop in the office of some accountant that was in a different state. It was like we had no access to this thing. And we would have to like write out the invoices and email it to them, and then they'd send the invoices, and just I don't know, it just didn't work, So we finally, the CPA, the CFO came in just to kind of do analysis, and like his goal was to be able to see, like, do you know if you're profitable? And this he really took me. It was like a watershed moment, like just took me out on this whole thing and really changed the way we did business, because it was basically like, I don't know, and I don't even know where to start. Like, it's like, it's just a whole thing. It's just so, people have to start tracking hours, all this kind of stuff, right? So, but the data wasn't there. Like, costs weren't categorized. We didn't see any data. We had no visibility, anything like that. And so that triggered a move to QuickBooks Online, back when QuickBooks Online wasn't actually that great for business. And, it's still questionable in areas, but it's gotten a lot better. But it's just this idea that, hey, we need to be readily accessible. We need real data. And so we went through, I would say, like, whatever you choose, like, make sure you can categorize expenses, think through your business units and your marketing costs, and, all those different areas, so that you can create reports that actually show you whether or not you're profitable, even into I wanted to know profitability on the product line level. So is our marketing more profitable than our development, or vice versa? I wanted to be able to see that because, because I think that's just really important for business. Anyway, so that's what it got.
Yeah,
us.
I think you need to always be able to see real time, put everything to an expense, and then you should be able to pull P&L real time anytime.
I will say, like, it's still hard getting reports that show data well through any of these platforms. Like, we're in e-commerce, and so I'm used to being able to go into the financial side of, like, whether it's Shopify Plus or another e-commerce platform or Google Analytics, and being able to see data, kind of slice and dice it, see trends. And it's surprising that, like, for instance, QuickBooks Online, they have all that data, but you can't see, that I know of, reports that show trends and those kind of things in the right way. But we use QuickBooks Online. All of our invoices and receipts go through there. Our payment actually gets processed there as well. We also have another payment provider that we do some payments through. And that allows us to, again, you want to be able to function as a business with a foresight of some stability.
That's a great
And
point.
if you don't know what you're going to make 3 months from now, at least with a good forecast, then I would venture to say that you're in a scary place, for sure, because you just don't know.
Yeah, that's good. It's probably a good place to end. I'd love for us to next time pick up on this whole idea of finances and billing and start talking a little bit more about payroll and that side of it, because I think that's a whole nother side, on not only on the invoicing side, but on the payroll side.
Yeah.
There's so many tools out there, so many software.
If you're a startup agency right now, I think there's some really great online tools specifically for smaller to mid-sized agencies. And they're super user friendly, and where you don't have to have a PhD and those things to really understand. So we'll talk about those next time. And
I also like to say, again, we haven't said it in a few episodes, if you like what you're hearing and you'd like to follow us, please rate us and review on iTunes. It really helps a lot. And we also do have a growing, we don't give it as much attention as we'd like to, but we want to start doing that more. It's our Facebook group for Agency Exposed podcast. So we're going to get on that more actively very, very soon, but we need you to participate so we have some people to talk to in there.
yes,
Yeah, questions, feedback, all that kind of stuff is really helpful. So,
Absolutely. All right, guys. Until next time.
till
All right.
next time.
Talk to you later.
ciao.